1 week passed. The Drekari forces retreated from Veland space. Their fleet scattered to the far corners of the galaxy, broken and leaderless. The warlord who had terrorized 100 worlds was dead, and the creature who had killed him was already becoming legend. The battle deity, they called him. The Silent Death. The human who would not fall. Songs were written in languages Yuna could not understand. Messages of gratitude poured in from across the galaxy. The alliance between humans and Velans, once a cold political arrangement, became something unbreakable. They had fought together. They had bled together. They had watched a single man do what armies could not. Taiho slept for 3 days. His wounds were severe. The Velan healers said that any normal creature would have died 10 times over. They did not understand how he had kept fighting, kept moving, kept killing. They whispered about human biology, about adrenaline and pain tolerance and the strange resilience of Earth creatures. But Yuna knew it was not biology. It was something deeper, something harder, something that had been forged in fires she could not imagine. On the 4th day, he woke. Yuna was sitting beside his bed when his eyes opened. She had not left his side for more than a few hours at a time. She told herself it was duty. She told herself she was simply watching over an asset of the Empire. She knew she was lying. "You are still here," he said. His voice was rough and weak. "Yes, you did not have to stay." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at the ceiling and smiled his sad smile. "I suppose my secret is out." "Yes," she said. "Everyone knows. The entire galaxy knows. That is unfortunate." She did not understand. "Why? You are a hero. You saved millions of lives. The Emperor himself wants to give you the highest honors of the Empire. I do not want honors." He turned his head to look at her. "I wanted to sit in gardens. I wanted to read books. I wanted to be the disappointing husband who does not matter." He paused. "I wanted to forget." Yuna felt something twist in her chest. She had mocked him for 3 months. She had treated him like dirt beneath her feet. And all that time, he had been carrying weight she could not imagine. "Tell me," she said softly. "Tell me everything." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak. He told her about his childhood on Earth, a small village, a loving family, a normal life that ended the day the thorns came. He told her about joining the military at 16, about lying about his age because he wanted to fight. He told her about training that broke weaker men, about commanders who saw something in him that he did not understand. He told her about the Ashwalkers. "We were 300, he said, young and proud and stupid. We thought we would save the galaxy. We thought we were invincible." His voice grew quiet. "The thorns taught us otherwise." He told her about battles that lasted for days, about friends who died in his arms, about choices no person should ever have to make. He told her about watching everyone he loved fall, one by one, until only he and Desu remained. "We walked out of the fire," he said, "but we left pieces of ourselves behind, parts that we could never get back." Yuna listened without speaking. She had been trained since birth to be strong. She had been taught that weakness was shameful, that tears were for cowards. But as Taiho spoke, she felt moisture on her cheeks, and she did not wipe it away. "When the war ended, I could not stop," he continued. "I could not be normal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Every time I slept, I heard their screams. I was a weapon that did not know how to become a man again." "So you became a diplomat," she said. "I tried to find purpose. I tried to help people instead of killing them." He laughed softly. "Then they asked me to marry a princess on a distant world. A political arrangement. A sacrifice for peace. I thought maybe this was my chance. Maybe I could finally be something other than what they made me." He looked at her with eyes that held more pain than she had ever seen. I'm sorry that I was not what you wanted, he said. I am sorry that I could not be the great warrior you deserved. I tried to hide what I was. I tried to be gentle. I tried to be small and harmless and forgettable. Yuna reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm, just as it had been at their wedding. But now she understood the warmth differently. Now she knew what it had cost. You saved my father, she said. You saved General Seok. You saved Hannah and the servants and the guards. You saved me. She squeezed his hand. You are exactly what I deserved. I was simply too blind to see it. Taiho's eyes widened slightly. Your Highness. Yuna, she said. My name is Yuna. We have been married for 3 months. You may use it. A different kind of smile crossed his face. Smaller, more real. Yuna, he repeated, as if testing the word. I married you out of duty, she said. Because my father asked it. Because my people needed it. I did not want you. I did not respect you. I treated you like an animal, and you accepted it without complaint. I understood, he said. I was wrong. She cut him off. I was proud and foolish and cruel. I looked at you and saw only what I expected to see. I never looked deeper. I never asked questions. I never tried to understand. She lifted his hand and pressed it against her cheek. I am asking now, she said. I am trying now. And I am making you a promise, Taiho. I will not marry you again out of duty. But I will stay with you out of choice. He stared at her for a long moment. She saw tears forming in his eyes, tears that he had probably not shed in years, tears that he had forgotten he could still produce. I am broken, he whispered. I have seen things and done things that can never be undone. I wake up screaming. I see enemies in every shadow. I am not sure I know how to love anymore. Then we will learn together, she said. Slowly, carefully, one day at a time. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. Something in him had shifted, like a locked door finally opening. Then I will try, he said quietly. I will try to be worthy of that choice. 3 days later, Taiho was well enough to walk. The first thing he did was return to the garden. Yuna found him there at sunset, sitting in his usual spot among the silver flowers. The city was still being rebuilt around them. The palace was still scarred with battle damage. But the garden was untouched, a small island of peace in a world that had nearly burned. She sat down beside him. They did not speak for a long time. They simply watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. The stars began to emerge, one by one. The same stars they had both been watching for months. It is beautiful, Taiho said. Yes, Yuna agreed. I used to look at the stars and feel only emptiness, he said. They reminded me of all the worlds I had fought on, all the people I had lost, all the things I could never forget. And now? He looked at her. His eyes were still sad, still heavy with old pain. But there was something else there now. Something new. Now they remind me that I am still alive, he said. That there are still beautiful things in the universe. That maybe, after everything, I am allowed to be happy. Yuna leaned against him. His body tensed for just a moment, surprised by the contact. Then he relaxed. The Dreckery will come back, she said. They will not forget what you did, I know. And you will fight again. We will fight together. I know. He put his arm around her shoulder. But not today. Today, we watch the stars. She smiled. That sounds perfect. They sat together as darkness fell. Two souls forged by war, finding peace in each other. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of enemies. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new pain. But tonight, they had this moment. This garden. These stars dotting each other. For Yuna, It was enough for Taiho. It was more than he had ever dared to hope for. Far above them, the stars burned bright and cold and eternal. They had witnessed empires rise and fall. They had watched civilizations bloom and die. They had seen humans do impossible things over and over again, refusing to accept the limits the universe tried to place upon them. And tonight, they watched a simple scene play out in a small garden on a distant world. A princess and a battle deity, sitting side by side, learning to love. Some would say it was just a small thing, a tiny moment in an infinite universe. But the stars knew better. They knew that the smallest things were often the most powerful. And they knew that this was only the beginning. What happened next would become legend. The Drekari commander charged at Taiho with claws extended. It was a creature bred for war, 8 feet of armor and muscle and killing instinct. It had destroyed 1,000 enemies across 100 worlds. It did not fear anything. Taiho stepped to the side. The commander's claws tore through empty air. Before it could turn, Taiho's hand shot out and struck its throat. The sound was like a hammer hitting stone. The commander staggered. Taiho struck again and again, 3 blows in less than a second, each one hitting the same spot. The commander fell. It was still alive, choking, clawing at its crushed throat. Taiho did not look at it. He was already moving toward the next enemy. Yuna watched from the floor. Her mind could not understand what her eyes were seeing. Taiho fought the way water flows downhill. There was no struggle, no effort, no hesitation. Each movement led into the next with perfect smoothness. A Drekari lunged at him, and he twisted past its attack and broke its arm. Another swung a blade, and he ducked under it and drove his palm into its chest with enough force to crack its shell. He was not fast. He was simply always in the right place before his enemies could reach him. He was not strong. He simply knew exactly where to strike to cause the most damage with the least force. He was not fighting the Drekari. He was taking them apart. 5 soldiers went down in 10 seconds. 10 in 20. The survivors backed away, their confidence shattered. They had conquered civilizations. They had broken empires. But they had never seen anything like this. Taiho picked up a fallen Drekari blade. It was a massive weapon, meant for creatures twice his size. In his hands, it looked like a toy. He did not speak. He did not shout battle cries or make threats. He simply walked forward, calm and silent, and began to kill. The Drekari tried to run. Taiho did not let them. Yuna pulled herself to her feet. Her shoulders screamed in pain, but she ignored it. She stumbled to her father's side. Lord Quan was still breathing, still alive, but barely. General Seok lay nearby, unconscious but not dead. By the time she looked up again, the council chamber was silent. 30 Drekari soldiers lay on the floor. Taiho stood among them like a ghost in a graveyard. He was covered in their blood, but none of it was his own. His face was completely calm. His breathing was slow and steady. He looked at Yuna. "Can you walk?" She nodded. "Get your father to safety. More will come. Where are you going?" He turned toward the door. "To end this." She grabbed his arm. "You cannot fight them all. There are thousands in the city." Taiho looked at her hand, then at her face. There was no emotion in his eyes. No fear, no pride, no anger. Just a vast and terrible emptiness. "I know," he said. Then he walked away. Yuna wanted to follow him. Every part of her screamed to chase after this stranger who wore her husband's face. But her father was dying, and Seok was wounded, and she had a duty that came before everything else. She carried them to safety. She found Hana and the surviving guards. She organized the evacuation of the wounded. And all the while, she listened to the sounds of battle echoing through the palace. The sounds kept moving. First the entrance hall, then the courtyard, then beyond into the burning streets of the capital. Daisu arrived an hour later with human reinforcements. Their ships had broken through the Dreckery blockade. Soldiers poured into the city, pushing back the invaders. "Where is Taiho?" Daisu asked. Yuna pointed toward the smoke and fire in the distance. "Out there, fighting." Daisu's face went pale. "Alone?" "Yes." He turned and ran. Yuna followed. They found him in the central plaza. The Dreckery command ship had landed there, a massive vessel of black metal that blocked out the sky. Hundreds of soldiers surrounded it, the elite guard of the Dreckery warlord. They were supposed to be unbeatable. They were supposed to be the finest warriors in the Dominion. They were all dead. Taiho stood before the ship's entrance. His robes were torn and burned. His bare feet left bloody prints on the stone. He had fought his way through the entire palace, through the streets, through an army of enemies. And he was still standing. The door of the command ship opened. The Dreckery warlord emerged. Yuna had seen images of these creatures, the supreme commanders of the Dreckery forces. Nothing had prepared her for reality. The warlord was 12 feet tall, covered in armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. Its eyes burned with cold intelligence. In its hands was a weapon that looked like a cross between a sword and a cannon. It looked at Taiho. It looked at the bodies of its soldiers. It made a sound that might have been surprise. "You," it said. "You are the one who has done this?" Taiho did not respond. "I have conquered 100 worlds," the warlord said. "I have killed millions. I have crushed armies beneath my feet. And you think you can stand against me? You, a single human?" Taiho raised his stolen blade. The warlord charged. It was fast. Faster than anything that Sai should be able to move. Its weapon came down in a blur of motion, a strike that could have split a shuttle in half. Taiho stepped inside the blow. He was too close for the warlord to hit. Too small for it to see clearly. Too fast for it to react. His blade moved once. The warlord stopped. It looked down at its chest, at the line of silver that had opened in its armor, at the blood pouring out. "What?" it said. Taiho struck again. And again. Each blow was precise. Each cut opened a new wound. He moved around the warlord like a dancer, always one step ahead, always just out of reach. The warlord swung its weapon wildly. It hit nothing but air. It stumbled. It fell to one knee. Taiho stood before it, looking up at the creature that had burned his adopted world. "You are right," he said quietly. "I am a single human." He drove his blade into the warlord's throat. "That is all I have ever needed to be." The warlord crashed backward into its own ship. The impact shook the ground. And then it was still. The watching Dreckery forces, thousands of them still scattered through the city, saw their commander fall. They saw the small human standing over his body. They heard his silence louder than any war cry, and they ran. The Battle of Valoria Prime was over. Yuna walked toward Taiho through the field of bodies. He did not turn to look at her. He simply stood there, covered in blood that was not his own, staring at nothing. "Taiho," she said. He blinked. Slowly, the emptiness faded from his eyes. The cold thing that had been wearing his face retreated, and something almost human returned. He looked at her. "Are you hurt?" She almost laughed. He had just killed 1,000 enemies. He had defeated the most powerful warlord in the Dreckery Dominion. And his first question was about her. "I am fine," she said. "Good." He swayed slightly. For the first time, she noticed the wounds he had been hiding. Cuts on his arms. Burns on his chest. A deep gash across his ribs. He had been dying the entire time. He had simply refused to stop. Yuna caught him as he fell. She held him in her arms. This small, broken, impossible man who had saved her world. Stay with me, she said. Do not die. That is an order. He smiled slightly. It was the same sad smile she had seen in the garden. As you command, he whispered. Your Highness. Then his eyes closed, and he was still. Yuna held him and screamed for help. Around them, the city burned. Above them, the enemy fled. And in her arms, the man who had become a battle deity slept the sleep of the dead. The warning came too late. Yuna was in the council chamber when the first explosion shook the palace. The great crystal windows cracked. The ancient chandeliers swayed. Nobles screamed and ran for the doors as dust rained from the ceiling. What is happening? Lord Quan demanded. He tried to stand from his throne, but his old legs failed him. General Seok rushed to the window. His face went pale. The Dreckery, he whispered. They are here. Yuna pushed through the panicked crowd and looked at the sky. Her blood turned to ice. Hundreds of ships filled the heavens. Black warships with jagged hulls, like the claws of some massive beast. They descended through the clouds in perfect formation, raining fire upon the city below. Towers crumbled. Streets burned. Millions of her people were dying, even as she watched. How? She said. How did they get past our defenses? Treachery, Seok said. His voice was thick with rage. Someone disabled the outer sensors. Someone opened the gate. He grabbed his communication device and shouted orders to the military commanders. Yuna turned to her father. We need to get you to safety. There is no safety, Lord Quan said. His eyes were sad but steady. This is the end they always promised. The Dreckery have come to finish what they started. I will not let them. Yuna drew her blade. It was a weapon of ancient Velen steel, passed down through 100 generations. General, rally the palace guard. We make our stand here. The next hour was chaos. Yuna led her guards through the burning halls. The Dreckery had landed troops in the palace courtyard, and they were pouring through every entrance. She saw them clearly now, these enemies she had trained her whole life to fight. They were tall, taller than Velans, with bodies covered in black armor-like shells. Their heads were like insects, with too many eyes and jaws that could bite through metal. They carried weapons that fired bolts of green energy, and they were everywhere. Yuna killed the first one that came at her. Her blade found the gap between its head and shoulder, and the creature fell screaming. She killed the second and the third. Her guards fought beside her, brave warriors who had sworn to protect the throne. One by one, they fell. Fall back, she shouted. Protect the council chamber. They retreated through the corridors, leaving bodies behind. Yuna's arms burned with exhaustion. Her blade was chipped and stained with alien blood. She had trained for battle since childhood, but nothing had prepared her for this. The Dreckery were relentless. They did not stop. They did not fear. They simply kept coming, wave after wave, an ocean of death that could not be held back. She found Hana in the eastern wing, trying to help wounded servants escape. Her handmaiden's face was streaked with tears and blood. Your Highness, Hana gasped. Thank the gods you're alive. Where is my father? Yuna asked. The council chamber. He refused to leave. He said he would die on his throne like a true emperor. Yuna grabbed Hana's arm. Get these people to the underground tunnels. I will hold them as long as I can. But your Highness, go, now. She did not wait for a response. She turned and ran back toward the council chamber alone. She found it under siege. Dreckery troops had broken through the main doors. Lord Quan lay on the steps of his throne, bleeding from a wound in his chest. General Seok stood over him, fighting desperately against a circle of enemies. Yuna charged. She moved faster than she had ever moved in her life. Her blade sang through the air. One Dreckery fell. 2. 3. She reached Siok's side and stood with him, back to back, fighting the endless tide. The Emperor? She asked. Alive, Siok grunted. Barely. We need to get him out. There is no out. They have the palace surrounded. A Dreckery claw caught her shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm. She stumbled, and another blow sent her crashing to the ground. Her blade flew from her hand. Siok tried to help her, but 3 Dreckery tackled him at once. She heard him scream as their claws tore through his armor. Yuna tried to stand. A massive Dreckery boot slammed into her chest, pinning her to the floor. She looked up at the creature above her. It was larger than the others, with golden markings on its shell. A commander. The commander made a sound that might have been laughter. It raised its weapon and pointed it at her head. This is how I die, she thought. Not in glorious battle. Not protecting my people. Just here, on this floor, with my father bleeding beside. Me and my world burning around me. She closed her eyes and waited. For the end. Step away from her. The voice was quiet, calm, utterly without fear. Yuna's. I snapped open. Tae-ho stood in the doorway. He was still wearing his simple robes. His feet were bare. His hands were empty. He looked exactly the same as he had every day since their wedding. Small and soft and completely harmless. The Dreckery commander turned to look at this new arrival. The other Dreckery made their laughing sounds. One of them said something in their clicking language that Yuna did not understand. The commander gestured with one claw. 2 soldiers moved toward Tae-ho, weapons raised. Yuna wanted to scream at him to run. She wanted to tell him he was a fool, that he could not fight these creatures, that he was going to die for nothing. But she could not speak. She could only watch. Tae-ho looked at her for just one moment. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Yuna saw something change. The calm mask fell away. The gentle scholar disappeared. What rose in its place was something else entirely. Something cold. Something ancient. Something that had walked through fire and come out the other side. Close your eyes, Yuna, Tae-ho said softly. You do not need to see this. She did not close them. The first Dreckery reached him. It swung its weapon in a killing blow. Tae-ho moved. She had seen him train in the moonlight. She had thought that was fast. She had been wrong. This was something beyond speed. One moment the Dreckery was swinging its weapon. The next moment it was falling, its head twisted at an impossible angle. And Tae-ho was already past it, already moving toward the second soldier. The second one died before it could even raise its gun. The room went silent. Every Dreckery stopped moving. Every eye turned toward the small human, standing among the bodies of their soldiers. The commander's foot lifted from Yuna's chest. It stepped forward, its many eyes fixed on Tae-ho. Human, it said. Its voice was deep and grinding, like stones rubbing together. What are you? Tae-ho did not answer. He simply looked at the commander with those cold, empty eyes and waited. And Yuna, lying bleeding on the floor, realized that she had never truly known her husband at all. The man she had married did not exist. That man had been a mask, a costume, a gentle lie worn by someone who had forgotten how to be anything else. The thing standing in that doorway was not gentle. The thing standing in that doorway was what happened when a human stopped pretending. And for the first time in her life, the crown princes of the Velen Empire felt afraid of a human being. 3 months passed like cold water through fingers. Yuna threw herself into her duties. She trained with the palace guards every morning. She attended council meetings every afternoon. She studied battle reports and diplomatic messages every evening. She did everything she could to forget that somewhere in her palace, a human walked the halls with her family name, but forgetting was impossible. Tae-ho was everywhere. She would see him in the gardens, sitting alone among the silver flowers, reading books from the palace library. She would catch glimpses of him in the corridors, speaking softly with servants and guards. She would hear his name in conversations she did not want to hear. "The human is very kind," Hannah said one morning as she brushed Yuna's hair. Hannah had served Yuna since childhood. She was the closest thing Yuna had to a friend. "He remembered my daughter's name." He asked about her studies. "Humans are good at pretending," Yuna said coldly. "They wear masks to hide their weakness." "Perhaps," Hannah said. But she did not sound convinced. The reports kept coming. Taiho had helped a servant carry heavy supplies. Taiho had spent 3 hours talking with an old gardener about flowers. Taiho had given his coat to a shivering child in the lower halls. Small acts. Meaningless acts. The acts of someone trying too hard to be liked. And yet the staff adored him. Yuna did not understand it. In Velen culture, kindness without strength was worthless. A warrior who could not fight was no warrior at all. A prince who could not protect his people deserved no respect. Taiho had shown no strength, no power, no fire. He was soft and quiet and gentle. Why did everyone like him? One night, Yuna could not sleep. Her mind was restless with battle plans and political problems. She walked through the palace to clear her head, and her feet carried her to the training yard. She stopped at the edge of the courtyard. Someone was already there. Taiho stood alone in the moonlight. He wore simple training clothes, and his feet were bare on the cold stone. Yuna pressed herself into the shadows and watched. He began to move. At first, she thought it was some kind of dance. The movements were slow and flowing, like water over rocks. His hands traced patterns in the air. His body shifted from stance to stance with perfect balance. Then the movements grew faster. Yuna's eyes widened. This was not a dance. This was combat. She recognized the strikes, the blocks, the counters. But she had never seen them performed like this. Every motion flowed into the next without pause or hesitation. There was no wasted energy, no unnecessary movement. It was beautiful and terrible, like watching a storm contained in human form. For 20 minutes, Taiho moved through the forms. When he finished, he was not even breathing hard. He simply sat down in the grass and looked up at the stars, the same way he did every night. Yuna did not move. Her heart was beating fast, and she did not know why. She thought about what she had seen. That was not the training of a diplomat. That was not the movement of a weak man. Something did not match. Something was wrong. The next day, a visitor arrived at the palace. His name was Deizu, and he was human. He was older than Taiho by perhaps 10 years, with gray at his temples and a scar across his jaw. Unlike Taiho, he carried himself like a soldier. His eyes never stopped moving, always watching, always calculating. "An old friend," Taiho said when he introduced the man to the court. "He served with me during my time in the coalition military." Yuna watched them carefully. When they thought no one was looking, they spoke in low voices. Deisu laughed at something Taiho said, but the laugh was sad somehow. There was weight between them. History. Pain. That evening, Yuna found Deisu alone in the guest quarters. She entered without knocking. "Tell me about him," she said. Deisu looked at her with careful eyes. "Tell you about who, Your Highness?" "My husband." "Tell me who he really is." For a long moment, Deisu was silent. Then he sighed and sat down on the edge of his bed. "What do you know about the border wars?" he asked. Yuna knew very little. The border wars had been fought between humans and a species called the Thorns, far from Velen space. It had ended before she was born. "I know humans won," she said. "We survived," Deisu corrected. "That is not the same as winning." He rubbed the scar on his jaw. "The Thorns were like your people, Your Highness. Strong, fast, built for war. They thought humans were weak. They thought they would crush us in a single campaign. What happened? They learned what humans become when our backs are against the wall. Daisu's voice grew quiet. Taiho was part of a unit called the Ashwalkers. They fought in battles that no one was supposed to survive. They went into hell again and again, and somehow they kept walking out. Yuna felt something cold crawl down her spine. How many survived? Of the original 300? Daisu met her eyes. 2. Taiho and myself. The room felt smaller suddenly. The air felt heavier. Yuna thought about the gentle man who sat in gardens and talked to servants. She thought about the calm eyes that showed no anger, no pride, no pain. Why does he hide it? She asked. Because he does not want to remember, Daisu said. Because every time he closes his eyes, he sees the faces of everyone he could not save. Because the man who walked out of those battles was not the same man who walked in. He stood and faced her directly. You think he is weak, Your Highness. You think he has no fire. But I have seen him fight. I have seen what he can do. And I am telling you, Princess, you do not want to see that man. You do not want to wake the thing that sleeps inside him. Yuna left the guest quarters with her mind spinning. That night, she found Taiho in the garden again. He sat in his usual spot, looking at the stars. She walked toward him. Her footsteps were loud on the stone path, but he did not turn. Tell me the truth, she said. Tell me who you are. Taiho was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at her, and she saw something flicker behind his eyes. Something dark and old and tired. Why do you want to know? He asked. Because I saw you train. Because I spoke with Daisu. Because nothing about you makes sense. He smiled slightly. It was a sad smile. The smile of a man who had smiled very little in his life. Some things, once spoken, cannot be unheard, Princess, he said softly. Let me remain your disappointing husband a little longer. Let me sit in gardens and read books and pretend that I am only what I appear to be. The truth will come eventually. It always does. He turned back to the stars. Yuna stood there for a long time, watching him. She thought about the whispers in the court. She thought about the mockery, the contempt, the endless jokes about her weak human husband. She thought about how he accepted all of it without complaint, without anger, without pride. She had believed he was weak. She had believed he had no fire. But now she wondered if the fire was simply buried so deep that no one could see it. She wondered what it would take to bring it out. She wondered if she truly wanted to know. For the first time since her marriage, Yuna felt something other than contempt for the man beside her. She felt curious. She felt uncertain and deep in her chest, in a place she did not want to examine. She felt the smallest seed of respect beginning to grow. She did not speak to Taiho again that night. She simply stood beside him in the darkness and looked up at the same stars he was watching. And for the first time, the silence between them did not feel like punishment. It felt like the beginning of something else. The throne room was silent. Yuna stood before the Grand Council, her silver skin catching the pale light from the crystal windows above. She was tall, even by Velan standards, and her golden eyes held the cold fire of royalty. She had trained her whole life for moments like this. She had learned to show no weakness, no fear, no emotion. But today, her heart was breaking. The alliance must be sealed, her father said. Lord Quan sat upon the Emperor's throne, his voice heavy with age and sorrow. The Drekari grow stronger every cycle. They will come for us. They will come for everyone. We cannot stand alone. Then let us build warships, Yuna said. Let us train more soldiers. Let us fight as Velans have always fought. We have done these things, General Seok replied. The old warrior stood at the Emperor's right hand, his scarred face grim. It is not enough. The Drekari number in the trillions. Their hunger for conquest knows no limit. We need the humans. Yuna felt her hands tighten into fists. The humans. Those small, fragile creatures from the distant world called Earth. She had seen images of them. They were soft. They were weak. Their bones broke easily. Their skin tore like paper. They lived short lives and died from diseases that Valens had cured 1,000 years ago. And yet, somehow, they had spread across the stars. They had built colonies on 100 worlds. They had survived wars that should have destroyed them. The human coalition has agreed to the alliance, Lord Kwang continued. But they require proof of our commitment. They require a bond that cannot be broken. What bond? Yuna asked, though she already knew the answer. She had known it the moment she was summoned to this room. Her father looked at her with tired eyes. Marriage, my daughter. You will wed the human envoy. You will join our bloodlines. You will show the galaxy that Velens and humans stand as one. The words hit her like a blade through the chest. She wanted to scream. She wanted to refuse. She was the crown princess of the Velen Empire. She was a warrior who had killed her first enemy at the age of 12. She had dreamed of marrying a great champion, someone whose strength matched her own, someone whose name would echo through history. Not a human. Not one of those fragile little creatures, but she was also her father's daughter. She understood duty. She understood sacrifice. The Drekari would burn their worlds to ash if they came. Millions would die. Our people would become slaves or corpses. When does he arrive? She asked. Her voice did not shake. She would not allow it to shake. Tomorrow, her father said. His name is Taiho. The next day, Yuna stood in the great entrance hall with 100 nobles and 1,000 servants. Banners hung from the walls. Musicians played songs of welcome. Everything was grand and beautiful and hollow. The human shuttle landed in the courtyard. Yuna watched through the tall windows as the door opened. The man who stepped out was not what she expected. She had imagined humans would at least try to impress. She had imagined armor, perhaps, or fine clothing, or some display of technology. Instead, she saw a man in simple dark robes. He was shorter than her by 2 heads. His hair was black, his skin was pale brown, and his build was slim. He looked like a scholar, not a warrior. He looked like someone she could break with one hand. The whispers began immediately. This is their envoy? He looks like a servant. The princess must wed this creature? Yuna kept her face still as stone. Inside, her shame burned like fire. Taiho walked through the entrance hall with calm, measured steps. He did not seem to notice the stares. He did not seem to hear the whispers. His dark eyes swept across the room without emotion, and when they found Yuna, he simply walked toward her and stopped. Your Highness, he said. His voice was quiet and even. He bowed low, the bow of a commoner to a queen. I am Taiho of the Human Coalition. I am honored to meet you. Yuna looked down at him. She did not hide her contempt. She had been taught that weakness should be despised, and everything about this man screamed weakness. You are smaller than I imagined, she said. A few nobles laughed. Taiho straightened from his bow. If her words hurt him, he did not show it. I understand your disappointment, Your Highness, he said. I will try not to burden you. She waited for anger. She waited for wounded pride. Any Velen man would have challenged her for such an insult. But Taiho simply stood there, calm as still water, his expression unchanged. It made her furious. Where was his fire? Where was his spirit? Did humans have no pride at all? The wedding took place 3 days later. The ceremony was held in the Temple of Stars, the holiest place in the Velen Empire. Thousands watched as Yuna walked down the crystal aisle in her white battle gown, the traditional dress of Velen brides. Taiho stood at the altar in a simple black suit. He looked small beneath the towering statues of Velan gods. The high priest spoke the ancient words. Yuna and Taiho exchanged vows. Their hands touched briefly as rings were placed on fingers. His skin was warm, she noticed. Warmer than she expected. When the ceremony ended, the crowd cheered. The alliance was sealed. The galaxy would know that Velans and humans were now family. But Yuna felt nothing. She looked at her new husband and saw only a stranger. A weak, quiet stranger who would share her name but never her heart. That night, they were taken to the royal chambers. The room was vast and beautiful, filled with flowers and soft light. A great bed stood at the center, meant for a husband and wife. Yuna stopped at the door. "You will sleep in the eastern chamber," she said. "I will sleep here. We will live as husband and wife in name only. Do you understand?" Taiho nodded. "I understand, Your Highness." "Good." She paused. "You may go." He bowed again and walked away without a word. Yuna watched him go, then closed the door and stood alone in the darkness. She thought about her future. She thought about the years ahead, living beside a man she did not love, could not respect, would never want. She thought about the children they would eventually have to produce, half Velan and half human, creatures that would be scorned by both worlds. She lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The stars shone through the crystal dome above, cold and distant. What did I do to deserve this? She whispered to the empty room. No one answered. In the eastern chamber. Taiho sat by the window and looked at those same stars. His face was still calm. His hands rested on his knees. He did not seem sad or angry or hurt, but if anyone had looked closely, they might have seen something old and heavy behind his eyes. They might have seen shadows that did not belong on a diplomat's face. They might have wondered what kind of man could accept such treatment without a flicker of pride. But no one looked closely at Taiho. Not yet.